So, my name is Dr. Rachel Tarlington. I'm one of the virology lecturers here at Nottingham, along with my colleagues Janet Daly, Stephen Dunham and Julia Kidd and Ruth Blunt. We've been doing some work here on Schmallenberg virus in Europe as this outbreak's been progressing. So what this presentation is an update on how the virus is working, what we think is happening with it at the moment, and the current situation in Europe as of January 2013. So why the fuss? So the virus was initially discovered in cattle with diarrhoea in Germany and the Netherlands in autumn 2011. It wasn't clear when the virus was first described whether it was just an incidental finding, something unusual that was in some diarrhoea samples, or whether it was something to worry about. What caused some alarm at the time and led the groups that initially reported the virus to publicise it early and set up testing monitoring for it was that the virus is very similar to a group of viruses, the best known of which is Akabani virus, which are known to cause birth defects in calves and lambs in Australia and Japan. Some of these outbreaks of birth defects can be very large. For instance, up to 42,000 has been reported in an individual outbreak in Japan. Now, these viruses mostly affect ruminants, which is mostly sheep, goats and cattle, in terms of commercial livestock. There have been no reports ever of these types of viruses causing disease in humans. Now, it's probably a good thing those labs set up this test and monitoring system, because as of spring-summer 2012, over 6,000 farms in Northern Europe reported deformed lambs or calves or adult animals affected with the diarrhoea and milk drop syndrome. So the link at the bottom is a video that's in German, but it has some very good video footage on it of affected lambs, in particular affected lambs showing neurological signs of the virus. So how these viruses work. Usually Schmallenberg causes, or Akabani cause mild or no disease in adult animals. In adult cattle, there have been reports in Europe with Schmallenberg of cattle with diarrhoea, fever and or milk drop. However, the problem is that you've got this mild disease in adult animals, but the problem is if a pregnant animal is infected, that the virus preferentially replicates in the nerve cells of the fetus, and this causes deformities in the growing fetus. The types of deformities you get depend on exactly which stage of pregnancy the animal's at, so how far along in development the fetus is when it's infected. If you get infection in very early pregnancy, like a fever and the damage to the placenta and the fetus caused by the virus, quite often results in abortion and or return to service or problems with fertility. If the fetus is a bit further along in the development, at the stage where its nerves and bones and skeleton are developing, you will see problems in the bones and joints. And what happens for your skeleton to develop properly, it requires stimulation from your muscles. For your muscles to develop properly, they require stimulation from your nerve cells. If the nerve cells are damaged due to Schmallenberg virus infection, your muscles don't develop, your skeleton doesn't develop properly. And you end up with these distinctive fetuses with all or parts of their limbs fused. And that's one of the more distinctive deformities you see with Schmallenberg virus, is these lambs or calves that have most of their skeleton fused together. If the fetus is a bit further along in development, past the stage where its muscles and skeleton are forming, you will mostly see neurological deficits. You will get animals where pretty much most of their brain hasn't developed, and these will often present as looking quite normal, but they're what's known as dummy calves or lambs. They often can't suckle, can't stand. Other important thing to realise here is that these animals are not going to get better. The damage is permanent. Their brains, their muscles, etc. just haven't developed. So they're not really viable lambs or calves and usually have to be euthanized. So what we're basing all the things we're saying about how Schmallenberg is spread and behaving is mostly based on what happens with Akabani virus in Australia and Japan. So it's quite important to understand a bit about how these viruses work there. So that the most important thing is the viruses are spread by biting midges, members of the genus Culicoides, which is a picture of here. And what happens in these countries is there is an endemic area. In Australia it's usually in the northern tropical parts of the country. In Japan it's thought to actually be in China, where the midges are present all the time, the virus circulates all the time. Most animals get infected pre-puberty, so before their first pregnancy, and they in essence develop a lifelong immunity to the virus. The results of this means that most animals are immune before they ever have a pregnancy, so you only see very sporadic abortions or deformities, and these are most typically in first calving heifers. However, if there's a change in weather conditions, this changes the range of the midges, sometimes pretty dramatically and pretty quickly, by several thousand kilometres over the space of a few weeks, and this results in extending the range of the vectors and the virus into areas where there are large numbers of naive animals. And this is where you see the large-scale outbreaks of deformities we were talking about earlier. So back to Europe, what we know about the virus now. So the virus has been found in Culicoides species midges, and this is pretty much how it's spreading in Europe. We're pretty comfortable with that idea by now. So unfortunately for the epidemiological situation, that the midges are found all over Europe, and what seems to be happening is the virus is gradually spreading out from the areas where it was first described into the areas that didn't have it previously. This is probably just as the virus goes through the midge population. So the other important thing is that the virus was first identified in an area in the corner between France, Belgium, the Netherlands and Germany. And most of the cattle that have been tested in this area, where it was first identified last year, seem to have been exposed to the virus. So they're reporting 70 to 100% of animals in most herds have antibodies to the virus. So we're assuming that these animals are immune and that they won't have another affected calf or lamb in the future. But of course we will have to wait until this lambing and calving season to see whether that is true. So what's the situation in the UK as of January 2013? So the virus definitely circulated in the UK in summer and autumn 2012. So the last report from the AHVLA in December reported 976 holdings across most of England and Wales that have been exposed to the virus. The virus has also recently been identified in Northern Ireland. This is a mix of deformities and adult animals that have antibodies to the virus. So there's been quite a lot of other things going on. BioBest laboratories up in Scotland have been offering a bulk milk sample testing, which has been quite popular with dairy herds. And when the vets that are associated with the clinic here, when we've spoken to vets here that have sent off quite a lot of samples for this test, they're reporting that pretty much all the herds they've been testing have been exposed. And we're assuming that where most of the cattle have been exposed, most of the sheep have been as well. It's obvious that the virus-infected midges have been in that area. There's also been anecdotal reports coming in from farms or scanning contractors who've been scanning ewes for pregnancy diagnosis. They're reporting very large numbers of ewes scanning empty, and we're starting to get initial reports of early lambing herds with losses, some of them quite large, 30% or more, with typical deformities, which we're assuming are Schmallenberg. And there could be other reasons why those ewes are scanning empty. It's been a terrible year nutritionally and for liver fluke, but we have the virus around, and it will have had an impact on these very large numbers. Now we've also here at Nottingham bled our own dairy herd, which are an indoor herd. Somewhat worryingly, only 25% of the animals in our herd have tested positive for the virus. And this is kind of the worst sort of situation in terms of the epidemiology, because it means only a portion of them are likely to be immune to it. And that means when it circulates again in 2013, as it's almost certainly likely to, we will have ongoing problems in future years. What we don't know yet is whether the fact that our animals are pretty much indoors means they have a lower prevalence than other herds in the district, and we're doing some work as quickly as we can to try and sort that out. Now, if you compare this with the 70 to 100% reported in the Belgium and the Netherlands, you can see that we've got quite a different situation going on here. We also did some midge trapping here, which indicated that we have a slightly different range of midge species to the ones they have been reporting on the continent, which may mean that the epidemiology in the midges and the virus is a bit different in the UK. So the likely impact, well, we are already seeing, and we are likely to see deformed lambs and calves born in spring-summer 2013. That's pretty definite. The numbers will vary from farm to farm, and the types of deformities will depend on what stage of pregnancy the animals were at when infected. Now, we sent out our students last year, when they did their lambing placements, with a survey for farmers, and the Royal Vet College did the same. And the data the students' report showed some interesting things, which seems to be holding true at the moment as well this year, that losses tend to be very patchy. If you happen to be the farm that's affected, you can see losses as high as 30% for individual holdings. However, because the virus is midge-borne, it depends very much on where the midges were and what they bit on the day, and farms right next to each other can have very different prevalences. So one farm might lose up to 30-40% of their animals, another farm might only lose a few, and that's to be expected with a midge-borne virus. We're pretty certain the virus is going to continue to circulate. We have the types of midge species, they're here all the time. It's already circulated 2 years in a row. It's likely to keep going. The best case scenario is that it settles down to an endemic situation where most of the animals become infected pre-puberty and we don't see so many problems. The worst case scenario is if we only see partial infection of the whole herd each year, and then we have ongoing problems like this. Now, there isn't a lot that can be done in terms of management options at present. There is a vaccine being submitted to the Veterinary Medicines Directorate, and Mariel has announced they're running vaccine trials. However, with the best will in the world, the virus isn't likely to be available until mid-2013 at the earliest. Once that becomes available, we have a better picture of what's happening with how many animals are infected and how it's spreading through the midges. We'll be able to have some better options for vaccination and prevention in your animals. So obviously we'll try and keep this presentation updated, but the situation is moving quite quickly in this outbreak. We'll do the best we can to keep you updated as it goes. Thank you.